Okay, great. Thank you very much for the introduction, Plamen. And let me briefly explain the background behind this presentation. It is mainly inspired by a few methodological debates, not recent, actually long-standing in the cross-cultural literature. And these debates, well, they're centered around some empirical observations. The first such observation is that, well, many attitudinal variables, when aggregated, yields very high correlations between each other and also with other group level variables like economic variables, political variables, geographical variables, and so on and so forth. However, the same variables. So at the aggregate level, many attitudinal variables correlate very high. However, when taken at the individual level, they yield much smaller, much lower correlations. And in addition, some recent research on comparability of attitudinal variables across different large-scale surveys like World Valley Survey, like European Social Survey, and many other, shows that well, many popular and well-established measures can be claimed as non-invariant, that is, at best, limited comparable across nations. And these observations lead the discipline to spread across two camps. The first camp includes scholars who say, well, all aggregate measures are hopelessly flawed, and therefore we should use with a great care, and we should not trust many interesting and well convincing results based on these aggregate measures. And the other camp, well, guys who belong to this camp have a completely different position, that they claim that, well, there are a lot of measurement error at the individual level, and aggregation helps to overcome all this individual level noise, and therefore what we see at the aggregate level are real patterns, and what we see at the individual level, well, it's mainly noise. All these debates seem be still unresolved. At least it is my impression. That many other scholars may share my concerns regarding this. And I think that one of the key reasons for this debate to be unresolved is the lack of common language for the discussion, mostly formal language. So people take different formal statistical premises, make some conclusions from these premises, but well, these conclusions may be untranslatable into the language or into the premises of the other. And in this presentation, well, I do not pretend that I will say something new. The key goal of this presentation is just to refresh, clarify some important aspects of the problem. Maybe to offer simple formal notation, simple statistical instruments that may advance our debate about well, how legitimate, how valid is to use aggregate theory-based attitudinal measures in comparative research. Okay, let me let me clarify my own theoretical premises. Well, all we will see later, all tests and simulations that I will show you later, they are based on these premises. They are not necessarily mine. They mostly reflect the ideology of the aggregation help camp. But personally, I also think that many of these premises are at least legitimate, are at least plausible under some conditions. So the first premise is that it is typically believed by many scholars in cross-cultural research that culture, well, it belongs to the group level. It is essentially a group level phenomenon. However, it is clear it's data that cultural variables, attitudes, values, so well, you may define culture as you wish. Here I use this very, very generic umbrella term. So anyway, most cultural variables have a non-negligible, sometimes very large individual level variance. And they also tend to change with time. So culture is not static anyway. And from this respect, I agree that culture may be a group level phenomenon, but it is always a distribution, not a constant even at the group level. However, we can summarize it at the group level using some conventional statistical tools like means, variances, medians, and so on and so forth. But even if culture is a distribution of individual attitudes, it may have an independent impact on individual attitudes. Because people, they typically grow up in a society, and therefore their own views and attitudes are affected by what is considered as socially desirable or just like prevalent attitudes of a given society. Of course, many factors may contribute to individual differences, but means are still quite representative estimators of what people in a given society think about one or another problem, or how attached they to a given to one or another value or behavioral norm, etc. Okay, let's assume for now that there are indeed exist some group level attitudinal constructs. I mean that some attitudinal constructs make sense at the group level. Therefore, they can be sort of independently of individual level attitudes, but still we cannot measure this group level constructs using group level variables. We have only one option to rely on some noisy individual level survey data. And let's also assume that group level correlations between cultural variables and all other variables, so between cultural variables themselves, are true correlations. So there are indeed some nomological networks that we want to recover using individual level data. And for now, for my simulation experiments that I will report later, I assume that these group level correlations are true, but again, they're based on variables measured with errors. And the key question which I want to answer is what happens when we attempt to estimate these group level correlations using noisy scores, aggregated scores based on individual level data. Okay, now a few notation. I hope that it will not be very difficult, and I will not focus on this notation a lot, but I hope that we'll have a lot of time to discuss this during the Q&A session if, there will be any question regarding to this. Okay, suppose that we have some group level attitudinal variable, and its true value is labeled by capital Y J, where J is just an index for groups. Most natural example of any group for cross-cultural researchers is country. Next, YIJ. I here is an index for individual, J as usual for countries. Y is an individual level attitude related to the group level cultural norm, for example, Y capital. Notice that, as I said when I commented on the previous slide, I assume that Y affects individual, that group level variable affects individual level variables, but not vice versa. Notice also that all individual level variables are measured with error, and therefore it is important to true individual scores.
Boris, sorry, I think your sound is disappearing again. Maybe you could try without the mic, or without the headset. Yeah.
Okay, let me try to do this without mic. Do you hear me?
That seems better. Yeah, it's definitely louder. I think it's clear enough.
Okay, I will try to speak louder, but I can't promise that, well, it's not easy to cry for half an hour. Okay, should I restart from the very beginning of the slides, or?
I think you can just continue.
Okay, so Y with subscript ops is just an observed individual level attitude measured with error. Finally, capital Y with subscript hyperscript ops is a group level observed attitudinal summary. For example, just a mean of individual level observed scores. Also notice that there is a
group level structural variable, again, it is a very generic label. You can give an empirical meaning by associating this variable wj with, for example, geoclimatic conditions in a given country, historical legacy, state of economy, political regime, etc. And also notice that there is a structural relationship between a group level culture variable and a group level structural variable. Let's assume that y is a function of w, and the relationship between them is described by some coefficient beta with subscript wy. But of course, y is also measured with error. There are some unexplained, unobserved factors that contribute to approximational variations in y, and we denote the impact of these factors by lowercase u with subscript j. And this u, well, we assume that it is normally distributed with zero mean and some variance. We don't know this variance. Okay, what are the key quantities of interest for us in this setting? The first key quantity of interest is the reliability of the observed means with respect to true group level cultural variables yj. And the reliability, one of the ways to define the reliability coefficient is to compute the correlation between the true score and the observed score, and to take the square of this correlation. The second quantity of interest is the strength of the relationship, the estimate of the strength of the relationship between w and pi, and we'll denote it as beta wy. However, regression analysis is not the only way to measure associations at the group level. Another way, well, maybe more naive, but still widely used, is to compute correlations between two aggregate level variables. And it is also interesting because, well, many people who belong to the aggregation helps camp, they often refer to high aggregate level correlations between culture and some other structural variables. They argue that these high correlations can be used as evidence of high validity of group level cultural summaries. So correlations are also of some interest, and therefore the third quantity of interest that I focus in my simulations is how the correlations between the structural variable and the observed culture is related to the correlation between structural variable and true culture under different possible scenarios of measurement error. So what happens when we aggregate? To understand what can be the relationship between the true culture and the observed culture, we need to, well, to employ two equations, one of which belongs to the multi-level regression theory and another one to this classical test theory. So the first equation, which defines the true individual attitudinal scores, well, it is a multi-level equation. So any individual score is a group mean score plus some contribution from individual factors plus some individual level error. And the true individual scores are related to the observed individual scores via the following equation from classical test theory. True score plus some systematic error. I assume here that systematic error is just, well, an additive term which does not vary within countries. It may, but, well, anyway, when we aggregate, it is it collapses to a single score for every country, plus some random individual level measurement error. Notice that epsilon, which is not measurement but prediction error for the true scores at the individual level, it is, as usual in multi-level theory, it is assumed to be a random error that is zero mean with some variance. And eta yj, it is measurement error, but it is also random. Therefore, we also assume that it has zero mean. Nu, is a group level measurement error in observed scores. We typically don't know for sure its distribution, but well, I will make some plausible assumptions about this distribution later when I will introduce my simulations. Then X or Yj, individual level predictors of Y. Well, we also assume that it is a zero mean variable with no variance across groups in the mean values of X. So if the cross group, if the between group variance of X would not be zero, it would not be a problem because, well, all between group differences in the level of X, they would affect individual scores only via the effect of Yj. So Yj can be sort of random intercepts, typical in multi-level random effects models. Therefore, everything that affects Y on the group level affects it only via this group-specific intercept. So it is plausible to assume that X has zero mean and no between group variance. However, the within group effects of X are allowed to vary between J. So well, that's quite a plausible assumption because well, in many real-world applications of multi-level models, using, for example, the world value service data, it was found that well, the effects of individual level variables often vary across countries. So what
Boris, may I have a question?
Yes, Chris.
If you go back, if you go to the second bullet point in this equation where you have Y observed Ij, so Vj is a group level measurement error and this Nyj is an individual level measurement error.
Mm-hmm.
But you are also saying that the individual level measurement error is random and the group level one is systematic.
By systematic, I mean that it affects all individuals within country. It is not necessarily systematic on the group level. It is systematic within country level.
Okay.
Thanks for this question. It is very important clarification. Okay, may I continue? Fine. So what happens when we aggregate observed individual scores? This equation, which is basically the mix of this and this equation, reduces to this equation. Why? Because, well, it has this term, epsilon, has zero mean within each country. This also has zero mean, therefore, well, they disappear when we aggregate. Since x's do not vary across nations, when we aggregate, we also have zero, and irrespectively of the values of beta, this term also becomes zero. Therefore, when we have aggregated observed scores, they are equal to the true cultural score for this country, plus some systematic error. Systematic again for country, not across countries. New may also be systematic across countries, but well, we'll discuss these scenarios on the next slide. Therefore, if we want to measure culture using observed scores, necessarily noisy from some survey, the only obstacle, again, if my formal model is correct, I'm not sure that it's correct, but anyway, if it is correct, the only obstacle to obtain reliable estimates of country level culture scores using the individual level data is the systematic group level error nu. Okay, how nu can behave itself in real world data? It depends on a few factors. First of all, what are the relationships between nu and also the true cultural score and other group level factors, and also how larger is the contribution of measurement error to the total variance of the observed scores. So these two are key factors that control the impact of group level measurement error on group level estimates. Notice that nu can be related to the non-invariance problem because, well, two popular types of measurement non-invariance, metric and scalar non-invariance, are often defined as well, non-equivalent scale units or scale origins between countries, but anyway, all these deviations from full invariance will contribute to group level scores by shifting them in one or another direction. Notice that the classic measurement error theory says us that when mu is independent of any group level factors, that is, all error terms are country specific, no systematic pattern across countries, then the estimates of group level associations should be biased downward. So if you find that some group level correlation or regression is significant, then, well, controlling for measurement error will not cancel this finding out. The most likely outcome is that you will get even higher coefficient. But when a new J correlates with either dependent variable or independent variable at the group level, so the situation may be more complicated. And therefore, it is necessary to study this scenario under, well, different possible conditions which may be encountered by cross-cultural researchers. And I did 3 simple simulations. The first one, which is described here, well, it is a very simple scenario, non-systematic measurement error at the country level. So we have some country-specific biases, but these country-specific biases are independent of each other. So the expectation of mu at the country level is 0, but it may have some variances from very small to very large. And I don't have too much time to comment on on the simulation in details. So let me briefly describe the results. So when we assume that mu is independent of any group level factor, that is, it is random at the group level, then we may expect the following results for our quantities of interest. First of all, the larger the standard deviation of mu, that is, the larger its impact to the variance of the observed cultural scores versus true cultural scores, the lower is the reliability of y-ops. That is, the means that we get are not very reliable, but they are mostly unbiased, except the scenarios when the level of variance in group level error is very high. And unstandardized group level regression estimates are largely unaffected by the magnitude of measurement error in observed aggregate scores. However, the larger the contribution of error to the measured scores, the lower are correlations between country level variables. So measurement error, when its amount increases, it affects correlations because these are just standardized association measures, but doesn't affect regression coefficients. So in the second simulation, I considered the following scenario. When mu is independent of y, but it depends on w in different ways. So I considered 2 scenarios, negative correlation of mu and w and positive correlation. And this scenario seems probable because, for example, one may argue that in rich countries, people are typically more educated on average, and therefore they provide more consistent answers. Well, responding to theory questions is less cognitively demanding task, and therefore we have less measurement error in group level measurement error in richer countries. And the correlation between mu and w may be also positive. For example, in more repressive countries, people may be prone to give more socially desirable answers, and therefore we have more group level measurement error. So I assumed, okay, I think that we may discuss this simulation in detail during the Q&A. So let me briefly explain the results, because, well, the results are the most important thing, not numbers. So here I find that the dependence of group level measurement error on other group level structural factors may cause very severe bias in aggregate regression and correlation coefficients. And the direction of bias has the opposite sign to the direction of the association between measurement error and group level variable. And the group level reliability estimates also decrease when the variance of measurement error becomes larger. However, this effect is not as pronounced when we have the true correlation between W and Y not very large. In the final simulation, I consider the following scenario. Nu is independent of W, but depends on Y. Again, it can be quite a plausible scenario. In more conservative countries, people, again, may be prone to provide more socially desirable answers. For example, they, even if they personally don't think that homosexuals should be, well, punished, they may reveal such an attitude because, well, they are afraid of punishment from their fellow countrymen. Again, I consider two main settings: the positive relationship between Y and Nu, and the negative relationship between these two quantities, and the results are the following. When the group level measurement error depends on the dependent variable itself, on the measured variable itself, it again may cause bias in aggregate regression estimates, and also in the group level correlations between culture and something else. And as it was the case for the correlation between Nu and W, the bias in group level association estimates has the opposite direction to the relationship between Nu and Y. So if the correlation between Nu and Y is positive, then group level association estimates are biased downward. When this relationship is negative, then group level associations are biased upward. And of course, group level reliabilities also decrease with the increase in variance of group level measurement error. However, this effect is much more pronounced when the effect of W on Y is negative. Okay, just to sum up the key results from my simple simulation studies. First of all, individual level factors, at least formally, if my model is correct, they seem to not affect group level reliabilities and associations. Aggregation indeed helps. So guys from the aggregation helps camp, well, they may feel satisfied with this result. However, it doesn't mean that one should carelessly use group level scores in group level analysis, because group level measurement error also matters. It may decrease the reliability of aggregated attitudinal measures and biases the estimates of group level associations. So when Nu is independent or positively correlated with either group level culture or group level other group level structural variables, group level associations are typically biased downward. When Nu is negatively correlated with either Y or W, so the group level associations are biased upwards. And however, our group level regressions may be more they may be less sensitive to the absolute amount of measurement error. And well, they are affected only by the strength of the correlations between measurement error at the group level and group level variables. In contrast, biases in group level correlations may arise and be very large, both due to the strength of the group level correlations between measurement error and other group level variables, and the overall amount of measurement error at the group level. So what are the key take-home messages of my analysis? Aggregation helps, that's true, but it doesn't mean that it helps always and everywhere. Aggregate scores can be very flawed, and therefore it is necessary to take them with caution. What one can do in practice to address the problem of the measurement error at the group level and its potentially biased effects on group level estimates. First of all, it is important to underscore that descriptive analysis may help. Well, it is one of the main of the most famous cases of finding group level measurement error in the WVS data. An note published by Kutzman in Washington Post in 2014, where he described a very surprising case of Vietnam, where people had very democratic attitudes, but well, that was the problem of translation, as far as I remember. So when you create well, univariate descriptive plots like I don't know, plot of country means, and you see that some country has very unexpected mean, it may be the case that, well, the measurement error is non-random for this particular country. So you need to check further what's the problem with this country. However, even so many measurement errors at the group level cannot be detected so easy, and therefore more complicated analysis may be required to account for this group level measurement error. What we can do in this respect? First of all, it is possible to quantify, of course, approximately, not directly, but still, it's possible to quantify a group level measurement error using typical indicators of survey data quality. Percentage of duplicate, contradictory, missing, and so on and so forth responses. And then you may use this, of course, imperfect, but still quite good indicators of data quality, either directly or indirectly in group level analysis. And I would also recommend to complement any group level substantive analysis by some model of measurement error for this analysis. It can be done theoretically, for example, using curl-like causal diagrams that's, well, where you make different assumptions about measurement error patterns, and then you get some results about how biased can be your coefficients of interest under these measurement error patterns. And you can also do this quantitatively, empirically, either indirectly, by including reliability coefficients for key structural variables and testing the sensitivity of key findings, different amounts of unobserved measurement error, or directly by including measurement error indicators mentioned above, based on survey data in your group level models, and look how robust are the key coefficients to the presence of measurement error. Well, and finally, some limitations of my analysis and also open questions for further discussion. First of all, population parameters, which I used in my simulation, I didn't discuss in detail, but we can get back to this issue during the Q&A session. Well, population parameters, they may be considered arbitrary or inappropriate. I tried to set up the population parameters based on what I saw in papers previously published and based on the data from the WVS. But of course, I'm not a statistician. I might make a lot of mistake, and therefore it is important to reconsider once again other population parameters that I use possible, and what values for these parameters may be even more plausible given the current practice, given the, well, what we observe in large cross-national surveys. So any comments in this regard are very welcome. Second, it may be necessary to consider more complicated measurement error patterns. For example, when nu depends on both W and Y and not separately. Again, this situation is quite realistic, but it requires maybe more sophisticated, more time-consuming simulations and formal analysis. Notice also that in my analysis, I considered only single indicator group level constructs when we have a single individual level question used to measure this construct. So with multiple indicator constructs, the situation may be more problematic and the simulation may be more, again, complicated. And finally, the results that I present, they do not reflect another interesting problem, why high level correlations, that is correlations between group means, are much larger than individual scores. So is it the result of the fact that individual correlations are inflated or deflated by group level measurement errors, or concealed by individual level measurement error, or constructed to different levels have different interpretation, and therefore no need to expect similar correlations at both levels? So this debate is always very interesting, and I think that it is somehow related to what I have been talking today, but I do not see how exactly it is related. So any comments on this are also very welcomed. So basically that's it. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to get very helpful feedback from you. So thank you again.